party out of all the people that it took him 15 times to become the House Speaker in America. You guys got to give me a chance. Yeah, it has to be the second time or the third time. And then I had the plot of, okay, now I have maybe 20 supporters from the appointed senators. If I go again in the second time, I'll probably get 10 to 15 more. Then I return to the lower house, look around with the political parties that I did not promise not to join hands with, which were the military appointed parties. And then maybe the third time, I will get 377 and eventually become the prime minister. But it cut short. So instead of that 3, 4 times or 15 times that I tried to extrapolate, it ended only at the first time. So the second time, yeah, I went in, but 15 minutes before the prime minister's election section in the second time, I got a court order like this on top of my parliamentary desk 20 minutes before the process. So I had to walk out of the parliament. I could not perform my duty as the MP anymore. And then the process stopped during that second process. I fought the case. I returned to the parliament 6 months later to be part of the opposition, still the largest party in Thai politics, but opposition now. And then they dissolved the party and banned me for 10 years. So now I'm being forced to bench for 10 years. This is only the first year. I have nine more years to burn. and I'm planning to spend the future to do 2 things. And I guess that's the reason why I'm here at Stanford as well, is welcome.
You're good.
Okay, sorry. Which is to share my experience as a public policy student, regardless of where I graduated from. But I turned those textbooks into reality. I took classes of democracy. I took classes of how to run for public office, all those things that were taught to me back in 2010. I used those textbooks and managed my campaign and turned it into reality and won the election. So now I know what worked and what didn't work. And so then I returned back to the school that I graduated from and various universities, not only in America, in Japan, in South Korea. I'll be in Jakarta in April, Copenhagen in May, to really tell them what worked and what didn't work, as a student of public policy. That's the sharing part. But there's also to learn part, because I didn't learn much while I was a member of parliament in terms of, digital disruption, in terms of climate crisis, in terms of aging society, in terms of cybersecurity. All these things I get to learn while I'm at MIT, Harvard, or Berkeley, or Stanford. So that's how I'm planning to use my time. And also to groom next-gen leaders. So back at Harvard, I have a study group called Pad Thai and Politics with all the ASEAN students. They all wanted to start political party, by the way. Number 2 is Philippines. Number 3 is Thai. And then I do a lot of panel and speeches, and I help professors teach regardless of wherever. So I helped at Harvard, at MIT, and Cornell on this trip. And we had some discussion in Berkeley, or if Stanford wanted me to teach, I'll be happy to come and help. And maybe you have classes on public finance or corruption, and you want some practical Thai situations, then I stepped in and I look at your syllabus, and then I just go, with what I had experienced and things like that. So that's how I'm spending my time.
I'm curious to know what proportion of things that you learned at policy schools in American universities were useful in practice.
So political identity, campaign management, political communication, volunteer management, polling. So all these things, my professor's name was Steve Jarding, back over there. So I looked at all these planning and textbooks, but obviously I have to apply some local context, some Thai context into it. But precision politics, in a nutshell, was part about campaign. 2 things: precision politics and hyper local were the 2 things that we were managed to win the number of seats. So okay, let me be a bit more clear. So if there's 400 districts all over Thailand, then I look at 4C's framework thinking. I know GSP is not so far from here, but it's like private sector thinking, investment banking thinking, management consulting thinking of frameworks. So I had this 4C's framework, which is count, competitor, candidate, and constituencies. Count is the previous count from various times. So I look back 5 years. For this district, what were the trends? Then I look at the candidate of myself, whether they're strong, they're capable, they're young, do they have their own morale, character, and things like that. Then I look at the competitor. If they're a veteran, they've been there for 7 years, they get nothing done or something like that, then I know I address the competitive dynamics. And then constituencies, then I have the data points of which district is aging, which district is younger than 40 years old, which district is pro-labor, which district is environmental prone. So I know exactly what the customers pretty much demand. So if I put 4Cs together, out of 400 districts, the political canvas that I have, I focus on 160, not the total 400. And I got 151 from that 160. So that's what I meant by precision politics. And I was managed to divide districts into green color, yellow color, and red color. Red color is totally, absolutely no chance. Yellow color is swing states, swing districts. Green is ours. So I knew how to respond accordingly to this kind of planning, for example.
I think we have to concede that Harvard Kennedy School offers pretty good education, although we like to think FSI as well here. So it looks like a lot of people in the audience here and back home obviously are very knowledgeable about Thai politics, but I'm going to act like the least knowledgeable person here. It's not difficult to act like that about Thai politics and ask you about key players in Thai politics, so obviously politicians, but also you speak about the military, about the monopolistic kind of economic players. And this is to the extent you can talk about the king, the royal family. How do they intersect and how do they shape your policy approaches?
So we are a constitutional monarchy, just like Japan, just like Britain, just like Denmark. And usually the monarchy is revered up top. But the players down here, we have 3 M's against 1 M. So he asked about stakeholders, right? So we have military, we have monopolies, and then we have the media. Against the mass, which is the voters. So we have the mass, we have the voters behind us. But the military, the monopoly, and the media have something to lose once I become the prime minister, obviously. But that's really the only option that Thailand can finally catch up with any other countries in ASEAN or in the world, is to demilitarize, demonopolize, and decentralize Thailand. So Bangkok is not Thailand and Thailand is not Bangkok. And finally, SMEs have that kind of chance to prosper with like the large companies, and also that we have a civilian government and we have a strong professional military that can protect us from external threat, but never mingle with the internal affairs like in the past. Military coup in Thailand 13 times, 20 constitutions. I think only number 2 behind Honduras. So the kind of intervention from the military to stop democracy within the past, let's say 100 years, Thailand became democratic in 1932. That's approximately about every 7 years that the military will intervene in. But it doesn't stop there in the sense that there's another group of independent organizations that are starting to emerge in the past 20 years. So if you want to stop democracy in Thailand for the past 100 years, let's say, they will do with judicial coups. That's the most traditional way. 13 times in almost until almost 2 decades before this. And then in the past 20 years, they switch from military coup to judicial coup. So they have the military track, now they have the judicial track that dissolve political parties, 36 to be precise. I'm party number 36. politician number 252, because there were 251 politicians who got banned before me, including the father of the current prime minister. So instead of having just one arm to maneuver democracy through military power, military might, now they have the judicial path to do it. And they've been doing it for the past 20 years, and I'm the latest victim. Currently, this week, they open another path, which is the ethics path, morality path. So there's ethics committee that is directly or indirectly appointed by the military junta to have ethics weaponization. I mean, morality is good for politician as a compass to do something, but once it's weaponized, once it's selectively used, once it's unchecked, once it cannot be appealed, and disproportionately used, because if I'm found immoral, lifetime ban is the only penalty. Usually when it comes to these kind of things, you should have proportionality of law. The infringement is like this, the penalty is like this. I steal something, penalty is like this. I do drugs, penalty should be like this. I kill someone, penalty should be like this. But for this constitution, if I'm found immoral, even if I amend the law, I mean, I didn't go through corruption or sexual harassment or anything like that. The only penalty, if you are found immoral as a politician in Thailand, is a lifetime ban. So in a nutshell, they are trying to exterminate me from that 10-year ban that we laughed about to a political lifetime ban, political assassination. So to those audience in the back that might not understand, Thai democracy and the way you stop democracy, the democratic backsliding, the discreteness of it is military is one path, judicial is one path, ethics is one path. So they have many tools to play around with, and autocrats are becoming very smart, very discreet, because if it's the first one, we'll be all over CNN. And Obama administration will stop making ties with us a little bit, not much. The Europeans will stop, but now with all these, they still have elections, but the way they do it, instead of violence on the street, it becomes violence in the courtroom. From warfare becomes lawfare. From military coup becomes judicial coup. And it's much more discreet way of, keeping elected politicians at bay and keeping democracy from flourishing at the moment.
So rule by law instead of rule of law. Exactly in play. But in addition to that, morality is if it's under control by the elites, also that's a very powerful weapon.
Yes,
for the leaders.
Like ethical policing, very much like that.
No. So the challenging question is how you challenge that, and how you would break that cycle of coup d'etat and monopolies, and especially if media is on the other side, it becomes especially more challenging. So what are your pathways toward making Thai politics work?
Two things. I think we have to win more elections and dominating ideas also. Obviously, the authority platform for all those that I mentioned came from the military constitution back in the days. So constitutional amendment is something that we need to go to finally have some transparency to independent organizations, have some accountability to independent organizations, have that kind of linkage of the origin of independent organizations. 50,000 signatures to finally get rid of a judge who does not follow rule of law, for example. Those are the things that are pretty much clear: origin, transparency, and accountability. That's the what part. But the how part is, how do we amend the constitution with this kind of gridlock? Obviously, you need quorum. You need like MPs and senators to show up for quorum, similar to what happened in South Korea this year. But in the case of Thailand, death by quorum to stop change is devils is in the detail. And if we win more elections and dominate the ideas at the same time, finally it will reach that tipping point. And once you reach that tipping point, then it's a possibility of a constitutional amendment. But currently, it's impossible to amend the constitution. I think it's very definite or absolute with 90% chance that the constitutional will not be amended before the next election, unfortunately. But we still have to keep pushing.
Would you say elections in Thailand are generally fair? Going for the next election, do you have any?
I think the audience answered. The audience answered.
What are your key concerns for the next election if it happens soon enough?
All the way from structural to behavioral. Gerrymandering, obviously, is becoming very strong. Voter suppression techniques, organizing election days that it's not impossible for people to go, using electoral laws that stop people from effective participation. Overseas voting is not possible for local election, it's only possible for national election, which meant tremendously during my time. I look at the numbers of Thais in New York, Thais in LA, Thais in Chicago, Thais in Sydney, Thais in South Korea, Thais in Tokyo and Osaka, and I round that up. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. It helped the voting turnout and gave me that election victory. But if they know that this is the way that you turn a lot of voting out, they will discourage overseas voting or advanced voting, and the voting turnout will drop. During 2023, the voting turnout was 78%. January, there was a provincial election. That number came down to 55%. So this is like voter suppression techniques by design, making sure that the ballot is quite far, making sure that it's always taking a long time inside the ballot. And voters fatigue is the third thing that I'm worried about. So from structural to behavioral, such as making politics boring, dirty, or relevant, so that the younger generations don't give a hoot about elections anymore. They feel like, I don't want to listen to politics, or I don't want to get involved. I don't want to volunteer. I don't want to go and run for public office. And I think that's kind of my job, my sole task to meet with the Thais in Americans, whether they're interested in public policy or they're interested in politics. If they're interested in public policy, and if they're from computer science, if they're from the business school, if they're from education school, I have a path. I'm the bridge for you to really help Thailand. Some of them looked at me and was like, I'm going to run for public office when I return. I'm that kind of platform that coaches them or allows them to get into public office